There's a moment familiar to almost anyone who's experienced sustained gaslighting, and it's worth describing precisely because it captures something words alone rarely convey clearly enough. You're standing in a conversation, holding a memory you were completely certain of just minutes earlier, watching that certainty dissolve in real time, not because new evidence has emerged, but because the sheer confidence of the person contradicting you has somehow become more convincing than your own direct experience. This is the specific, disorienting power gaslighting holds, and today we're going to examine 4 specific tricks that produce this effect with remarkable, almost mechanical reliability. Let's be precise about what we're actually examining, because gaslighting gets used loosely in everyday conversation, sometimes stretched to cover any disagreement or any instance of someone having a different memory than you do. What we're tracing today is something considerably more specific: deliberate or habitual patterns designed to make you doubt your own perception, memory, or sanity. Patterns that follow recognizable structures once you know precisely what to look for. By the end of this, you'll have specific, concrete language for 4 of the most effective versions of this manipulation, language that makes them considerably harder to fall for the next time they appear. Let's start with the first trick, one that operates through pure repetition rather than any single, dramatic confrontation. The flat denial delivered with absolute, unwavering confidence, repeated exactly the same way regardless of how much evidence contradicts it. This is worth understanding precisely because its power doesn't come from cleverness or sophisticated argument. It comes almost entirely from consistency and confidence, delivered without any of the hesitation or defensiveness most people expect to see when someone is lying about something demonstrably false. Here's what makes this specific trick so genuinely effective, and it's worth understanding the underlying psychology precisely. Most people calibrate their trust in a statement partly based on how confidently it's delivered, an entirely reasonable heuristic in ordinary life, where confident delivery usually does correlate with genuine certainty. Someone employing flat denial exploits this heuristic directly, delivering demonstrably false statements with exactly the same unwavering confidence they'd use for something genuinely true. That never happened. I never said that. Delivered flatly, repeated identically no matter how many times you raise it, without any of the small inconsistencies or defensive tells most people expect from someone who knows they're lying. This is worth understanding as particularly disorienting because it removes something you'd normally rely on to distinguish truth from falsehood: the emotional and behavioral signals typically associated with deception. When someone delivers a flat denial without any visible discomfort, without any hesitation, without any of the markers you'd expect from genuine dishonesty, your own instinct starts to question whether your memory might actually be the thing that's wrong, precisely because the denial doesn't match your internal template for what a lie is supposed to look like. Let's talk about the second trick, one that operates considerably differently through addition rather than denial: the deliberate introduction of false specific details designed to make an entire memory feel unreliable by association. This is worth understanding as more sophisticated than simple denial, because it doesn't require denying the core event entirely. Instead, it involves inserting small, plausible-sounding details that didn't actually happen, details specific enough to seem like genuine, confident recollection, but different enough from your own memory that encountering them produces genuine confusion. Here's why this particular trick is so effective, and it's worth naming the mechanism directly. When someone confidently describes a detail from a shared memory that doesn't match your own recollection, a natural, reasonable response is to assume you might be misremembering that specific detail. This seems harmless in isolation, but once this pattern repeats across multiple memories, multiple conversations, each one containing small, confidently stated discrepancies, something cumulative starts to happen. Your overall confidence in your own memory, as a general capacity, begins to erode, not because any single instance was catastrophic, but because the accumulated weight of, wait, maybe I did misremember that too, eventually generalizes into a broader, more pervasive self-doubt about your memory as a whole. This is worth understanding as considerably more insidious than flat denial specifically, because it doesn't require you to disbelieve an entire event. It only requires small, repeated erosions, each one individually forgivable, each one collectively devastating to your overall sense of reliable, trustworthy memory. If you've ever found yourself, over time, becoming genuinely uncertain about your own memory in ways that feel disproportionate to any single incident, this particular trick, operating cumulatively across many small instances rather than through any single dramatic moment, is worth considering as a genuine possibility. Let's talk about a specific, common scenario that illustrates how these first two tricks often work together rather than operating in isolation. Imagine recounting a specific argument, one where you clearly remember a hurtful comment being made. The response might begin with flat denial regarding the comment itself. "I never said that," while simultaneously introducing a false specific detail about the surrounding context, an alternative version of where the conversation happened, what led up to it, what you supposedly said first that somehow justified whatever they claim they didn't actually say. This combination is worth recognizing as particularly effective because it attacks your memory on two fronts simultaneously, denying the core event while also destabilizing your confidence in the surrounding details, leaving you with a considerably less coherent, considerably less confident version of an event you were, moments earlier, completely certain about. What we haven't yet explored are the remaining two tricks, each one operating through mechanisms genuinely distinct from denial and false detail insertion, and understanding all four together, along with what they reveal about the deeper structural approach this kind of manipulation consistently relies on, is exactly where we need to go next. Let's move into the third trick, one that operates through a mechanism entirely distinct from the first two: strategic reframing of your emotional reaction as the actual problem requiring attention, effectively substituting the original issue with an entirely different, more easily dismissed one. This is worth understanding as considerably more subtle than outright denial because it doesn't necessarily deny that something happened at all. Instead, it redirects the entire conversation away from the actual event and toward your reaction to it, framed specifically as disproportionate, oversensitive, or evidence of some deeper personal instability that conveniently has nothing to do with whatever actually occurred. Here's how this typically unfolds in practice, and it's worth walking through the specific mechanics, because the redirection is often smooth enough to happen almost invisibly in real time. You raise a genuine concern about something hurtful that happened. Instead of engaging with the actual content of that concern, the response pivots almost immediately toward your emotional state itself. "You're being so dramatic about this. Why are you always so sensitive? This is exactly the kind of overreaction I have to deal with constantly." Notice what's actually happened here. The original event has essentially vanished from the conversation, replaced entirely by a new subject: your character, your emotional stability, your tendency toward exaggeration, none of which were actually the topic you raised in the first place. This is worth understanding as genuinely disorienting because it exploits a specific reasonable instinct most people carry, a desire to be seen as reasonable and emotionally proportionate rather than dramatic or unstable. Faced with the accusation of overreaction, many people's immediate instinct is to defend their emotional proportionality, inadvertently abandoning the original concern entirely in order to prove they're not, in fact, being unreasonable. This is precisely the trap this particular trick is designed to produce, redirecting your energy toward defending your own emotional stability rather than continuing to hold the person accountable for whatever actually happened in the first place. This is worth naming as particularly effective at producing genuine, lasting self-doubt, because unlike the first two tricks, which target specific memories, this one targets something considerably more foundational: your trust in your own emotional responses as reliable, proportionate information. If you're repeatedly told that your hurt, your anger, your discomfort is excessive or unwarranted, sustained over enough time, you begin to preemptively doubt your own reactions before anyone else even has the chance to challenge them. effectively completing the manipulation's work through your own internal monitoring without requiring their ongoing active participation at all. Let's talk about the fourth and final trick, one that ties together everything we've traced throughout this exploration into its most comprehensive and most damaging form: the deliberate cultivation of an external, alternative source of reality that competes directly with your own perception, often through recruiting other people, whether consciously or through subtle influence, to validate their version of events rather than yours. This is worth understanding as considerably more sophisticated than the first three tricks, because it doesn't rely solely on the direct one-on-one dynamic between you and the person gaslighting you. It extends outward, building a network of secondary validation that makes their version of reality feel considerably more objective and considerably more widely confirmed than your own increasingly isolated perception. Here's what this looks like in practice, and it's worth understanding the specific mechanism, because it often operates gradually rather than through any single, obvious moment. This might involve subtly, consistently sharing a particular narrative with mutual friends or family members before you've had the chance to share your own perspective, ensuring their version becomes the default understanding within your shared social circle. It might involve strategic mentions, in front of others, of your supposed tendency toward exaggeration or emotional instability, planting seeds that make your future accounts of harmful behavior seem less credible before you've even had the chance to share them. It might involve genuinely recruiting specific people, presenting a carefully curated version of events specifically designed to secure their agreement and their subsequent unwitting participation in reinforcing the false narrative. This is worth understanding as the most devastating of the four tricks specifically because it removes something crucial to maintaining confidence in your own perception: the ability to seek outside confirmation when your own certainty starts to waver. Remember everything we've traced throughout this entire series about how isolation makes people more vulnerable to exactly this kind of manipulation. This fourth trick doesn't just gaslight you directly, it preemptively gaslights the people around you, ensuring that when you eventually do seek outside perspective, hoping to finally confirm that your own memory and perception are accurate, you encounter instead a social environment already quietly primed to doubt you. An environment this person has spent considerable time and effort carefully cultivating, often long before you ever realized any of this cultivation was happening at all. This brings us to the final and most important part of this exploration, the one where we need to bring together all four of these tricks into a coherent understanding of the shared structure underneath them. Why recognizing this underlying structure matters considerably more than memorizing each individual trick separately, and what genuinely, practically protects you against all four of them simultaneously, once you understand exactly what they're all actually working to accomplish. Let's bring these four tricks together now, because understanding what they share underneath their different surface expressions is what makes this exploration genuinely useful, rather than simply a list of four separate warnings to memorize independently. Flat denial delivered with absolute confidence. False detail insertion designed to erode general memory trust. Strategic reframing of your emotional reaction as the actual problem, and the cultivation of an external competing version of reality through other people. All four of these share a single underlying goal worth naming directly: relocating the authority for determining what's actually true away from your own direct experience and toward theirs, and increasingly toward whatever consensus they've managed to construct around theirs. Here's what's worth understanding as the actual unifying mechanism underneath all four tricks, because it explains why they're so often deployed together, reinforcing each other, rather than remaining isolated, independent tactics. Each trick attacks a different pillar of your confidence in your own perception: your specific memory of events through denial and false detail, your trust in your own emotional responses through reframing, and your ability to seek external confirmation through the recruitment of others. Together, they don't simply damage your confidence in any single memory or any single emotional reaction. They systematically dismantle your entire general capacity to trust your own read on reality, replacing it with a persistent, exhausting habit of checking, qualifying, and doubting yourself before anyone else even has the chance to challenge you directly. Let's talk about why understanding this underlying structure matters considerably more than memorizing each individual trick separately, because this connects to something we've traced throughout many other explorations in this entire series. If you only learn to recognize these four specific tricks in their exact described form, you remain vulnerable to countless variations that share the same underlying structure while looking somewhat different on the surface. But if you understand the actual goal underneath all four, the relocation of authority over reality away from your own direct experience, you gain something considerably more valuable and considerably more durable: the ability to recognize this same underlying pattern regardless of the specific superficial form it happens to take in any particular relationship or any particular moment. Now let's talk about what genuinely, practically protects you against all four of these tricks simultaneously, because this is where everything we've traced throughout this exploration needs to resolve into something concrete and actionable. The single most effective, comprehensive protection available is one we've traced throughout many other explorations in this entire series: deliberately, consistently maintaining a private, honest record of what you actually experience in real time close to when it happens, rather than relying entirely on memory alone to hold steady against confident, repeated contradiction. Here's why this specific practice defends against all four tricks simultaneously, rather than only addressing one of them. Against flat denial, a private, contemporaneous record provides something considerably more reliable than memory alone: direct, time-stamped evidence of what actually occurred, considerably harder to erode through repeated, confident contradiction. Against false detail insertion, this same record allows you to check any new, contradicting detail against your own original account, rather than relying on your memory of your memory, which is precisely the layer this second trick specifically targets and exploits. Against strategic reframing, a private record helps you separate the original event from the subsequent conversation about your reaction to it, allowing you to recognize clearly when a conversation has been redirected away from its actual starting point. And against the cultivation of external, competing reality, having your own clear, private record gives you something solid to return to, a foundation that doesn't depend on social consensus in order to remain valid and true. Here's the deepest insight worth carrying forward from everything we've traced across this entire exploration, one that ties together not just this specific video, but so much of what this entire series has explored throughout its full length. Gaslighting, in all four of its forms we've traced today, ultimately succeeds by convincing you that your own direct experience isn't reliable enough to trust on its own, that it requires external confirmation, external agreement, external validation before you're allowed to believe it. The single most powerful counter to this entire structure isn't learning to argue more effectively or gathering more evidence to prove your case, though evidence certainly helps. It's the deeper, more foundational recognition that your own direct experience was never actually unreliable in the way these four tricks worked so hard to convince you it was. So if you've recognized any of these four patterns in your own life, whether happening right now or something you're only now, in hindsight, finally able to name clearly, let this be what you carry forward from everything we've explored throughout this entire series. Your memory, your emotional reactions, and your own read on reality were never actually the unreliable thing these tricks worked so hard to convince you they were. What was actually unreliable was the confidence, however convincingly delivered, however consistently repeated, however widely reinforced through other people, of someone whose entire goal, whether fully conscious or not, was making you doubt something that was true all along. You don't need anyone else's permission or agreement to trust your own experience. You never actually did. Let's go further into something worth naming directly, because it deserves genuine space. What actually happens to your relationship with your own inner voice during extended exposure to these four tricks, and why rebuilding that specific relationship matters more than simply learning to intellectually recognize the tricks themselves once they're already happening. Here's what's worth understanding about this particular cost. Extended exposure to gaslighting doesn't just damage your confidence in specific memories or specific emotional reactions. It changes the actual ongoing relationship you have with your own thoughts as they arise in real time before any external contradiction even has the chance to occur. Many people describe developing a kind of automatic, preemptive self-doubt, a habit of second-guessing their own perceptions the moment they form, long before anyone else has said a single word. This is worth understanding as one of the deepest, least visible costs of sustained gaslighting, because it means the manipulation eventually continues running, quietly, even in the manipulator's absence, requiring no further active input from them at all. Let's talk about why this matters so much for actually recovering from these four tricks, rather than simply recognizing them intellectually after the fact. Recognizing gaslighting tactics is genuinely valuable, and everything we've traced throughout this exploration remains worth understanding clearly. But recognition alone doesn't automatically restore the specific foundational trust in your own immediate perception that sustained exposure gradually eroded. This restoration requires something more active and more deliberate. Consciously, repeatedly practicing trust in your own first read of a situation before checking it against anyone else's opinion, before immediately assuming you might be wrong, before automatically softening or qualifying your own initial reaction out of habit rather than genuine uncertainty. This is worth understanding as a practice considerably similar to something we've traced throughout other explorations in this series, the gradual rebuilding of self-trust through small, deliberate, repeated instances of honoring your own perception and noticing that it holds up, that you weren't actually wrong, that the automatic self-doubt was a conditioned habit rather than an accurate reflection of your own reliability. Each instance of trusting your own initial read and having that trust genuinely validated by reality becomes its own small piece of evidence, slowly countering years of accumulated conditioning that taught you the opposite. Let's talk about something else worth naming honestly here, because it addresses a specific common frustration during this rebuilding process. The tendency to overcorrect, becoming rigidly defensively certain about everything, refusing to consider any outside perspective at all, out of fear of ever again experiencing the disorientation these four tricks once produced. This overcorrection deserves gentle, honest naming because genuine confidence in your own perception was never actually meant to mean complete closure to outside input or genuine, healthy reconsideration when new, legitimate information actually warrants it. The goal was never rigid certainty in all circumstances. It was simply restoring your own perception to its rightful place as a genuinely trustworthy starting point, one worth defending against manipulation specifically, while remaining genuinely open to honest, good faith dialogue that operates according to entirely different rules than anything this exploration has traced. Let's close with something worth carrying forward from this edition specifically. Rebuilding trust in your own inner voice after sustained gaslighting isn't a single moment of realization, achieved once and then permanently secured. It's an ongoing practice strengthened through repetition, occasionally challenged by moments of old familiar doubt resurfacing unexpectedly, but genuinely, steadily available to you, one honest, deliberate act of self-trust at a time, until the voice that once seemed so easy to override finally becomes, once again, the voice you trust first, before anyone else's confident contradiction ever has the chance to reach it.